With offices in Radford and Blacksburg, Patrick K. Moore is a client-focused, community-involved law firm committed to you. If a legal issue touches your family, finances, or future, we can help. Whether it's real estate, business law, or estate planning, Patrick Moore welcomes the opportunity to speak with you about your legal issues.
Welcome, I'm Rose Martin, and we are right around the corner in St. Paul at the Mountain Heritage Museum and Gallery with Frank Kilgore. His latest book, Far Southwest Virginia, A Postcard and Photographic Journey, has over 1,000 postcards and photographic images, and it covers the counties of, let's say, Buchanan, Dickinson, Lee, Russell, Scott, Tazewell, Washington and Wise, and also the city of Norton. We are headed to far southwest Virginia for this episode, and it's going to be wonderful. Frank, thank you so much. And this is an amazing museum and gallery space.
Well, thank you.
And tell me, you've collected all of this?
Yes, ma'am. I started collecting odds and ends of relics when I was around 15 years old, and it just snowballed, as you can see.
And you're still collecting?
Yes. I am, and I'm on eBay a lot.
So tell me a little bit about the things in this amazing space.
Well, we have coal mining and railroading items and Native American artifacts, pre-Civil War and Civil War era artifacts. Have a lot of old postcards and photographs. I have a United Mine Workers Corner, which I've been told by some United Mine Worker members is one of the best that they've ever seen. Has some John L. Lewis memorabilia, some original things from his office. And then we have a second annex to this. We have about 2,000 square feet in all. We've got coal company scrip. Scrip is what the coal companies paid their employees with, so they'd have to redeem it at the coal company store at an advanced cost. And so it's mostly stuff from 200 years ago till maybe the 1950s. I hate to consider that vintage, but since I was born in 1952, but here we are, 67 years later. So I'm vintage, and anything older than me, I collect.
Well, it's an amazing collection, and as we were getting ready, we're walking around just looking at the pictures and looking at all of the artifacts that you've collected, and it really is a treasure trove of Southwest Virginia. It's a treasure trove of the time, it's a treasure trove of the people, and the stories that went into your book.
Yeah, the only time I really may have messed up, I'm an attorney, and I should have known this law, but I represented a fellow who came in one day and said he had a moonshine still in the window of his business to attract people, and it attracted the Alcohol Beverage Control Board officer who charged him with having a workable still.
Oh.
Well, I had one here.
Oh, you did?
So I learned a lot by representing my client that it's a Class 1 misdemeanor just to possess it. So I got a hold of the ABC officer and told him I was thinking about putting the still in the museum. What all would I have to do? And you have to get a permit. And so I avoided a Class 1 misdemeanor by having that client come in the week before I opened the museum.
Oh my gosh, isn't that something?
All I had to do is in the ABC officer's presence, knock a hole into the still so that it wouldn't be operable.
So it wouldn't be operable. Well, I remember seeing one of the postcards in your book of someone who was running for sheriff and had all those pictures of the still, but he didn't win on that campaign, did he?
I think destroying stills back in the 20s was probably not popular with some very extended families.
I'm thinking that you're probably right there. Well, and your roots go just so deep into this area with your father and your grandfather being coal miners, don't they?
The Kilgores first came here in what's now Scott County, Virginia. It was Washington County, and before that in Fincastle County. Before that, they came in 1770 up from North Carolina. 5 of the brothers fought at the Battle of Kings Mountain in 1780, and that's when Thomas Jefferson says was the turning point of the Revolutionary War because George Washington's Continental Army was on the run. And the Over Mountain men, the trappers and fur merchants and the pioneers and militia along the Clinch River and down in what's now Sycamore Shoals in present-day Tennessee. They lived on the frontier. There were still Native American wars going on, battles. And so they were great marksmen, and they traveled over the mountain. That's why they called it Over Mountain Men. When Major Ferguson, he's the only redcoat officer at the Battle of Kings Mountain, the rest of them were Tories, which were Americans who fought for the king. To make a long story short, the Tories numbered about 1,400, our side about 1,400. At the end of a fairly short battle, there was 800 Tories dead and 14 Patriots dead. So the air side fought using guerrilla tactics that they'd learned the hard way from the Native Americans. And the next year, the Battle of Cowpens was the coup de grace for General Cornwallis. He went north to meet what became his Waterloo.
Isn't that fascinating?
Yes.
And you never wanted to leave. It's been home, this area of Southwest Virginia, for you and your family, and it's really personal to preserve the stories and preserve everything about it. How come?
I went to Florida briefly to go to Forest Ranger Technical School when I was 17, and couldn't wait to get back home. And when I was driving back in my 41 Chevrolet, actually it was being towed back by a friend of mine. I blew the engine out, and when I saw the Clinch Mountain, I was home.
And you know, you come to this region and it's just breathtakingly beautiful, and people who come to visit love to stay here. And I think that's one of the reasons that we want to tell these stories and share with everyone not only the richness and the beauty of the region, but the history of the people and the fascinating story of the coal miners. And you know, we were talking about the fact that you look at diversity in this little pocket of, not really little, but this pocket of Southwest Virginia, and people wouldn't really realize how diverse we are, right? And yet it goes back generations.
The negative stereotype about the coal fields in Appalachia have held us back for years, and it started out through the media's exaggeration of the family feuds, the Hatfields and McCoys, and tarred and feathered us as being ignorant hillbillies. And so we're still trying to recover from that. But the fact is, in the turn of the century, the 1890s and starting in 1900 and forward, there were tens of thousands of immigrants that came to the coal fields, recruited by the co-op operators because of a labor shortage and an attempt to keep the union out. So sometimes they were used as replacement workers. Other times, because coal was hand-loaded, the coal was drilled by hand, blasted by hand, and sometimes pushed out in carts by hand. So it was hugely labor intensive. So the average coal miner could only mine 7 to 10 tons a day. Well, the demand was way beyond that. So sharecroppers from the deep south came up. We had immigrants from about 16 different countries. The United Mine Workers Journal back in the early 1900s was so diversified that it had 3 sections in one magazine. One was English, the other was Slavic, the other was Italian. So this was the third biggest, this being Central Appalachia coal fields, not just Southwest Virginia, was the most diversified melting pot, second only or third only to New York City and San Francisco in population.
When I read that in your book, I went back and I read it again because, again, it's something that people don't really realize, how inclusive and how diversified the region needed to be, and yet the people didn't see it like that. They were neighbors working with each other. Although I did read something funny in your book about you put together these different people and a little moonshine and some fiery tempers, right? And some generational fights, and it could get pretty nasty.
Well, everybody believes that we're just Scots-Irish that were in trouble and moved west to get out of trouble. It was the desire for land. They were never allowed to own land under the king's supervision. And so, yes, it was a thirst for land. Our ancestors, and there was Germans and English and Welsh too, defied King George III's edict not to come west of the Blue Ridge Mountains to try to keep peace with the Native Americans. We came anyway, and so you mix the Scots Irish, and then the other ethnic groups together. Then on Saturday nights, coal mining being the most dangerous occupation in the country at that time, it was like almost being in a combat zone when you were in the mines. There were so many ways to die. And so to release that pressure, when alcohol was mixed with the situation, you did have a lot of interesting nights, Saturday nights, to the point that there was a string of saloons in St. Paul, Virginia, where we're at now, called the Western Front, because there were so many fights. In fact, the new boutique hotel we have just across the street from here took that name, the Western Front Hotel. So yeah, you had some lively times. And I want to dwell on the black population that came to the coal fields. In McDowell County, West Virginia, which borders Virginia, 40% of the population was African American. There was almost 100,000 people in that county, that coal county, huge coal-producing county, at their peak. There was so much inclusiveness and freedom of movement and association in McDowell County that the newspaper up there dubbed it the Free State of McDowell.
Really?
And so the idea now that we're so sexist and racist in Appalachia really gets on my nerves, particularly in reference to the coal fields. I'll give you an example. In 1951, the city of Norton in Wise County had the first Little League team in the western part of Virginia. 1951, 68 years ago. They had black players on there because they worked with their dads. They were friends with the fathers of these boys, and they didn't think twice about having those kids on the baseball team. They didn't have anyone to play in the Western District. They were the only ones, so they would scrimmage with different teams. They won the Western District by default. The Eastern District was won by a Charlottesville Little League team. And that coach in Charlottesville refused to play them for the state championship because they had black players and demanded that they be removed before they came down here for the state championship. The coaches at Norton said, no, these are our friends, and that's crazy.
They're our teammates.
They're our teammates. No, we'll win by default. We'll win the state championship by default. So the Charlottesville team came down and got beat 12-3. I love underdog stories.
I do too. I do too. I love that story.
So it's much more inclusive in the coal fields. And I represented everyone that was arrested during the Pittston strike in 1989 and 1990, the United Mine Workers and the coal company called Pittston were involved in a strike. We had 3,000 strike-related cases, 1,300 clients, 330 felonies charges, so we worked around the clock on these cases. And one of the African-American miners testified in court when they asked him some questions. He said, when we go in the coal mines, there are no races or ethnicities, we're brothers. When we come out of the coal mines, we're brothers. In all those cases, imagine 3,000 cases, 1,300 clients. Not all of them were coal miners, some were sympathizers. But out of all those cases, not one person ever testified against the other. Not one of them ever talked to the police. Not one of them ever admitted anything. I've never had that happen. Most of the time people have sung like a canary by the time they get to the lawyer. Never had anyone turn and say, I'm going to testify and help myself.
There was a brotherhood.
It was a brother and sisterhood. My sister was a coal miner back in the 70s in Illinois. So, yeah, I'm a little tired of the stereotype. Was it a Shangri-La? No, we had our problems. But Central Appalachia coal fields were much more inclusive, much more libertarian, and much more able to get along with each other than any other place in the nation.
That's something. That's something. Is that part of what led you to put together this beautiful postcard and photographic journey book?
Well, that plus I want to preserve it, and I got interested in it because my great Ina Holbrook brought to me a postcard that had my papaw's picture I'm named after in the coal mines. And I thought, why would he have a postcard? How did he get in a postcard? Well, back then, the photographers would go door to door, take pictures, make your postcard one at a time, or it's called a real photograph postcard, so you can mail out your picture to whoever you wanted to. I had no idea that. I think that's when I got really interested in the postcard business.
Well, and I had no idea either that then they were hand colored, or that then you weren't be able to write on them initially,
Sure.
right? And then they were delivered. And there was a line in your book about the early postcard was like the precursor to today's Twitter and Facebook and social media.
Very
right?
few words could be.
Right, very few words, and everybody can read it, and everybody knows what's going on.
Everybody that handled it could read your business.
Well, and the way the book is set up, you took it county by county, and then you were able to see how things grew and how they changed.
Yes.
The collection is amazing about the what happened within the counties, and I was also fascinated how you ended the chapters with the little tidbit sections, right, of the little newspaper articles, or talking about the particular script. And you briefly touched on that a few minutes ago, but I guess I didn't realize that the script was for each coal company in those communities, only usable at that store, and yet, like you mentioned, inflated prices, and so the people would sometimes leave owing money from their paychecks, right? But they couldn't use them between counties?
The coal companies, the bigger ones, would build the house for you, your churches, schools, had the power plant to supply electricity, on the reservoir for the water. And when you moved into their house, and I understand this, they had to make money, but at the end of the month, when you got paid, they deducted, of course, the rent, the electricity, the water. They had their own police force. And then you had to buy your own black powder to blast the coal out, and buy your own equipment, and your coal mining clothes. So all that came out, and sometimes the miners would have a negative balance. So that's where Tennessee Ernie Ford got the idea for his song, "I Owe My Soul to the Company Store." So it was a rough life. So coal and logging, the extractive industries, help people get more money and buy things that they wanted, but it was also rough on the environment.
Well, in talking about that, I was fascinated about the chestnut trees, because I didn't even realize that, the chestnut trees had such a presence, or that when timber was low, they would just pick the rails up and move somewhere else where it needed to go.
Well, the timber industry came first, the mid to late 1800s and very early 1900s, because we had the world's best hardwood virgin forest in Appalachia. And so the timber companies come in and set up lumber camps, and those were much more transient, because when they cut the timber, the camp fell apart because there was nothing there to sustain it. Coal mining was a lot longer process, so you could have a coal camp or a town sustain 20, 30, 40, 50 years. The lumber camps were usually 5 to 10 years. But they did it, have narrow gauge railroads go up each major holler, as we call them, valley, and then they would pull up the tracks and go up another holler and take out that timber. But it was a major clear cutting effort all throughout Appalachia that denuded the hillsides and caused mass erosion and mass landslides. And the forests have recovered. We've had second, third, fourth cuts since that time. But so we've always kind of depended on the extractive industry here, then natural gas and coal bed methane gas. So that money always went to outside corporations, almost always went to outside corporations, mostly up north, because the speculators would come down, buy it up from people who didn't really know what they had. And so we never had real wealth here. The wealth went to stockholders in other parts of the United States and England. So part of the poverty of Appalachia is based upon the lack of generational wealth going out and not staying here. So that has been, it's almost like a third world country situation, except we did have the U.S. Constitution.
Yeah. Well, and the area's always been attractive to other wealthy outsiders who are coming in. I read in your book, the Vanderbilts came here looking to build the Biltmore here instead of in Asheville. In Scott County, I believe?
It was Tazewell County.
Tazewell County. So
Burke's Garden.
Yeah, they came in, what do you call that, God's thumbprint area?
God's thumbprint. It's a huge collapsed dome mountain that is surrounded by the rims of the remaining mountains, so it looks like a crater. A lot of people used to think an asteroid hit and made a crater. It was a geologic feature, and there's one little creek that, over millions of years, drained it. So that's the way they get in. The road goes in there to a gap where the creek is. Absolutely beautiful. That's in northern Tazewell County, and when you think of the coal fields, a lot of people say 7 counties. The actual present coal production comes out of 3 counties. That's Buchanan, Diggison, and Wise. The other peripheral coal fields that were in small parts of the other 4 counties, that's all been exhausted with just a little bit of exception. So the true coal fields are those 3. Where the 7 counties are called coal fields, I think as a group of regional recognition that at one time or another they had coal mining, depended on coal mining, but it's down to 3 counties now.
Well, but Pocahontas being the first, right?
Pocahontas, Virginia, and Tazewell County was the first large commercial coal mining done in Virginia, in far southwest Virginia. What a lot of folks don't realize is that coal was first mined in the New World near Richmond. So, and then you had anthracite coal as you come west in the Pulaski County and some of those counties. But the first European mining of coal occurred near Richmond.
So we didn't get the Biltmore. That ended up going to Asheville. We had a tornado, a worst tornado ever in the history of Virginia that tore the school. That was a horrific story.
That was in Scott County.
And the other story that really touched me was the story about how it was so poignant about your dad and going off to war. And something I didn't realize, which now after I read it in your book, I thought, of course they were marksmen living out here in Appalachia to where the city kids didn't know how to shoot a gun. So they were obviously tagged for something like that.
Or when you hear about Sergeant York and some of the other Appalachian, I think his name was Shifty Powers. It was one of the Band of Brothers. He's from Clinch Cove, Virginia, which is just across the mountain. They were great marksmen because they had to hunt to eat. And I know my dad was in World War II, and he was the division marksman, which means 6,000 men. He told me one time that he and 9 other guys who were the top 10 marksmen out of the whole division got a weekend pass before they were shipped to Europe, and they were making fun of their buddies from New Jersey and other places for not doing well. So when they get there, they were mop-up troops after D-Day. They were on the front line, and their buddies who couldn't shoot were in the back a mile or 2 in the rear fixing Jeeps and peeling potatoes, and they wished they hadn't shot so well.
Yeah. Well, this book is just so full of treasures of postcards and photographs, and really tells a story of love that you have for Southwest Virginia and in this area to preserve it. Would you be willing to read something for us?
Sure. Be happy to. I've got my cheap glasses
Good.
on. I'd like to read my dedication first.
Sure.
My papa, Frank Kilgore, who died from black lung disease, my late father, Arthur Kilgore, a coal miner and reformed moonshiner, my late mother, Clinus Johnson Kilgore, who never met a stranger and loved every child she met, every teacher and professor who urged me forward, and most of all, my beautiful bride, Teresa, who thankfully has poor eyesight and a forgiving heart. So that was almost a poem. First time I ever wrote a poem. And but here's a little introduction about this collection. There's an addiction worse than gambling, more suspenseful than sporting events, and as intriguing as mystery movies. That addiction is collecting old stuff. Thankfully, my addiction is restricted to mementos from far southwest Virginia counties of Buchanan, Dixon, Lee, Russell, Tazewell, Scott, Washington, Wise, and the cities of Norton and Bristol. I also collect primitive furniture, mining and logging artifacts, Native American relics, Civil War items, and as this book amply demonstrates, postcards and old photos from the past. Our region is generally referred to as the Virginia coal fields, but roughly half of the area's eastern geography is made up of non-coal-bearing limestone and shale, sinkholes, and caves, and is bounded by the huge and beautifully folded sandstone wall known as the Clinch Mountain. The region's coal-bearing portion, which lays roughly west of the Clinch River along the St. Paul fault line, consists of subterranean seams of relatively horizontal sandstone, siltstone, and coal, the pattern repeating itself from the surface to thousands of feet into the crust of the earth. This coal-bearing portion of far southwest Virginia is sometimes referred to as the true coal fields. The differences in landscape, land uses, and land ownership have colored the social cultures between the true coal fields of the west and the rolling limestone and clay farms and pasture lands to the east. The surface land, coal, and minerals of Virginia's true coal fields are largely owned by outside corporations which for 100 years have dominated and still substantially influence the economy and politics within their domain. Coalfield residents generally own small parcels of land with the coal mineral rights registered and other names, usually the successors to Clinchfield, Virginia Iron, Coal and Coal Company, Island Creek, Pocahontas, and Westmoreland, and Penn, Virginia, one of the region's oldest land and coal holding companies, is still a major owner of coalfield assets. These companies first leased out millions of board feet of the world's best old-growth hardwoods to lumber companies such as Ritter Lumber, Yellow Poplar, and McCorkle Lumber Company. Deep coal mining was next, then surface mining, and most recently the drilling of thousands of coal bed methane and natural gas wells. So that's our history in a nutshell.
And there's so much more to share in this book. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I appreciate that so much. And special thanks to Frank Kilgore for sharing his love of Southwest Virginia, the stories of Central Appalachia. The book is full of absolutely amazing postcards. You're taking a photographic journey back through time, and there's so much to share. The beautiful Mountain Heritage Museum and Gallery is a place that you might want to absolutely put on your bucket list to do and come visit and learn about the stories. We have a lot more to talk about, so check out our conversation online where we're going to be digging deep into the book and learning a lot more stories. I'm Rose Martin, and I'll see you next time right around the corner.